Greetings and welcome to this edition of the Pastor's Study. Again, these sermons are being brought to you by the Church of God Seventh-day with headquarters in Salem, West Virginia. If you would like any additional information, please contact us. And like I've said in the past, I wish you would, because you can see that there are certain things going on, especially here in the United States, which might cause you some alarm, and I hope it does, to the point where you might want to look into the Word of God and see what it is that He's telling us about these end times, because we are getting closer to the point where Christ is going to return to set up His kingdom. May not be tomorrow, may not be next week or next year, but as the days go by, we're getting closer and closer to that miraculous event. I will start off with a little story, and this one's a little cute story about two college co-eds that are talking, and one says to the other, "How did your blind date go last night?" And she said, "Oh, it was horrible." She said, "He showed up in a 1932 Rolls Royce." Roommate said, "Well," she said, "that's a special car, She said, that's just like super. What was wrong with that?" She said, "I believe he was the original owner." So what we're going to do is continue with our study of the book of Daniel. And today we have a very, very meaty chapter. We've gone over the events of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. We've talked about what happened to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Of course, we also studied what happened to Nebuchadnezzar himself, and then his grandson or great-grandson with the handwriting on the wall. And then along comes the new kingdom, right, of the Medes and the Persians. We've got, I guess it's, Darius, I believe. Darius comes along. He's about 62 years old, and right away Daniel finds himself in trouble with some of these other elders, let's say, within the framework of that kingdom, and of course they want to get him in trouble, and so this is what leads up to the lion's den. So we've gone all through that, and we are at chapter 7. Now, in chapter 7, it talks about in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. Now, this is going back a little bit, referring to a time when Belshazzar, that was the man at the feast who saw the handwriting on the wall, was still in power, and Daniel himself had a dream. And the visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. In verse 2, says, "Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven strove upon the great sea." Now, of course, the four winds of heaven and the great sea would be, mankind. Excuse me. So that would be the people. So what we're talking about here is that the vision that he is going to explain to us comes from the people. And it's going to coincide with Nebuchadnezzar's dream, but it's going to be laid out to him in a different way. And we're going to make a connection with what he dreams about here with something that takes place back in Revelation. So again, we might only cover chapter 7, but it's a very, very like I said, meaty chapter, chock full of information. In verse 3 it says, "And four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse from one another." The sea again, the people. And verse 4, "The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it." This particular animal coincides with Babylon. If you look up, I believe it's the Ishtar Gate, which is something that they discovered. The Ishtar Gate had symbols on it. It had, I think it had a dragon, it had something else on it, but it did include a lion. And I think one of the other symbols on the gate, and this Ishtar Gate was part of the gates of Babylon. One of the other symbols, I think it was made up of different body parts, and the body of, I think it says the body of a lion. And you'll see a lion with wings and things of that nature, which indicate, again, he's seeing the vision from a different side of it, or he's having this dream from another side of it, but it coincides with Nebuchadnezzar's dream. So it was like a lion, so it corresponds with Babylon, and it has one head. In verse 5 it says, "And behold, another beast, the second like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it, and they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh." Now this would be the Media Persian kingdom, and it is represented by a bear. And one of the things that I found is that this would be on the internet, it was talking about that they considered this the Media Persia or Medo-Persia kingdom to be kind of like the first superpower. And at that particular time, it united 3 important sites, which included Mesopotamia, the Egypt Nile Valley, and the India's Indus Valley. So at that particular time, they held control over a wide swath of land, had much power. And remember that these kingdoms had certain characteristics and traits, things that they did, things that they learned, and a lot of these things were passed on to the other kingdoms as they were overtaken. So information, we receive a lot of information today that was learned a long, long time ago, but we still are improving on some of those things that were introduced to us by other cultures, other kingdoms. And this is the same here. What they did was they conquered and incorporated, and in a lot of cases they added to information that they had, expanded it, and passed it down. And of course, as we're learning here in Daniel, this kingdom isn't going to last forever either. And in verse 6, it says, "After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it." Now this represents Alexander the Great. And it talks about a leopard being swift. And they always felt that Alexander conquered everything there was to conquer in a very, very swift, quick time. So much so, the rumor, of course, is that, he was so beside himself because it was like he conquered everything. There was nothing left to conquer. It's almost like he didn't know what to do with himself because he had, taken care of everything, and he was still a young man, and there was nothing left for him to do. That's the story in a sense. But he did it with such swiftness. Some things in other areas changed slowly. At that particular time, it happened very, very rapidly. So they used the symbol of the leopard. And because he died at a very young age, his kingdom, the Greek kingdom, was separated among his 4 generals. And that's where the beast has, leopard has 4 heads. And so it was divided among the generals. And then, of course, in 7, it says, "After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it, and it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Now, it was diverse from all the rest. I think we pointed this out a couple of weeks ago. This is Rome. Rome comes along and defeats the Grecian generals and takes over the particular area there. And Rome is different because now it introduces a religion. The other kingdoms were really just kingdoms in a sense. They were conquerors. They did what they wanted to do. And yes, there were things of a religious nature, truly. But in this particular time, at this crossroads in history, what happens here is that Rome is devising a way to incorporate everybody into its kingdom, and they're using religion. So they have the secular power of Rome itself, and then they want the religious power to try to incorporate everybody else into one big, kingdom. And they're hoping that by doing what they're doing, they're going to make one big unit that Rome would be in charge of, like forever and ever and ever. And it seems like mankind has always had these same visions. Every so often we've got somebody that comes along and thinks that they can, form this one world government, and they're going to make it work, and they'll use whatever means necessary to accomplish that. And really, the only person that's going to accomplish that is, Jesus Christ, because his Father is going to send him back here with the universal kingdom, and he's going to be able to incorporate mankind into that kingdom, at least, the ones that want to be there and have gone through the necessary steps and shown God and Jesus Christ that they really love them and want to be there, and they want to be part of that future kingdom, because that's really the answer. The answer isn't here and now. The answer is going to be in the future. Now, I want to point something out to you so that maybe this will make a little bit more sense. In this chapter, in 4, it talks about a lion. So that's one head. 5 is a bear. That's 2 heads. In 6, it talks about the 4 generals. So that would be 4 heads. So that gives us 6. And then the 4th beast gives us 7, would be 7 heads. All right. I'm going to turn right now. Keep your finger there. Let's go to Revelation 13. And in Revelation 13, chapter 1, it says, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea," again, that would be mankind, "and saw a beast rise up out of the sea," so out of the people, "having 7 heads and 10 horns. So we're talking about the same beast that Daniel was talking about in chapter 7. Now we see it here in Revelation 13. And then you'll note that in verse 2 it says, "And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, as were the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion." And then here we have this change where it says, "And the dragon gave him power and his seat and great authority." So we have the beast of Daniel rising up here in Revelation, but its power is, it's no longer this like secular power. It is this religious power now. This is the dragon. The dragon, of course, is Satan. Satan is giving the power to this beast. And this beast, of course, is Rome, relived, as it were. Rome still lives, even though we see that historically Rome itself kind of just disintegrates from its own living, or the way it lives, what it does, and it just kind of falls apart internally because of the things that it chooses to do. But of course, we know that at that particular time, Rome was still in power when Jesus comes along. And if you remember the vision that Nebuchadnezzar had, what does it say? It says that this stone that's made without hands comes along and, kind of crashes into the bottom of the man, right? It's got the iron and clay, the iron mixed with miry clay. The stone comes along, breaks it all in pieces. So at Jesus' time, even though they were in full power, we know that it doesn't last long. Yes, a couple hundred years more. Yes, it does. That in that respect, but it doesn't last long in comparison to where we're about say 1,500 years later, when Rome kind of disintegrated on its own. And what happened at that time? Well, the papacy comes into power, and they're the ones that kind of the papacy is born of the the Roman Empire. But what happens is that the papacy itself takes on power of its own. And so we don't have the secular Rome as much as we have the religious Rome. So if we turn back to chapter 7 of Daniel, and we go to verse 8, it says, I considered the horns, and beheld, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots, and behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. And this would be the papacy that's being born here. And what he does is he plucks up some of the first horns, right? And that would be, if you look it up, you'll see that the papacy defeated 3 particular kingdoms, and that would be the Heruli, 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 about 493, the Vandals, 534, and the Ostrogoths in 538 AD. And what this did was strengthen the hand of the papacy. And so the papacy assumed this power, and it had this power for a long, long time. We believe that to be that 1,260-year period, which would bring us up to about 1798. And that's how long the papacy really maintained a lot of power, especially over in Europe. You remember that there were times when the popes were, part of a, like a fighting force in a sense, and they would go out and they would conquer, what was it? I guess they went back and forth with different Ottoman empires or Turkish rulers, or, some of the other people at that particular time. I'm not exactly sure, but I know that there were this, this fighting that went back and forth, especially over the Holy Land. And up until a time when I guess it was Napoleon and one of his generals locked up the Pope, and that would have been about 1798. That was almost like the end of like their particular power, and they made a deal. We end up having, they were going to leave the, Rome alone, and later on, I guess we have the establishment of the Vatican, and we've got Vatican City, which is in and of itself a little kingdom, and it's self-ruling, and it has been for, I want to say, maybe, I think it was about 1931. I'm not sure of that date, but maybe about 90 years, 100 years, and it's been self-ruling. Now, what has happened in recent history is it's kind of like Rome is put on a back burner. It's almost like people don't think about Rome, and the whole rage now is, Islam. I was even reading something this morning where somebody said, well, some of the history writers, the biblical history writers, they've got this all wrong. It's not, Rome isn't the fourth kingdom. That isn't Rome, it's Islam. Well, I don't think that's correct, because Islam, if you keep in mind historically the way this works and logically the way it works, is that Jesus roamed the earth, in the flesh, let's say, from 0 to about 33 AD. And it wasn't until about 325, that would be the Council of Nicaea, where Constantine calls in most of the bishops of Rome, in a sense, to this council, and they make some very, very drastic decisions. And here we have a gentleman, Constantine. He is the ruler of a kingdom, but he's also going to be like the ruler of a religion. And so now that's, again, about 300 years after Christ walked on the earth. And Islam doesn't come along until about about 300 years later. I'm going to say 614, 15, somewhere around there. Again, don't hold me to that, but it's approximately 300 years later. So if you want to look at the sequence is that Babylon was defeated by the Medes and Persians. The Medes and Persians were defeated by the Greeks, and the Greeks were defeated by the Romans, and the Romans were in power when Christ walked on the earth. And so that fits the vision better than somebody who's saying Islam, Islam, Islam. I think that the Islam at this particular time is almost like something to distract us, because we're really not looking at Rome, and everybody's thinking, well, they had their day and it's not that way any longer. And so this is the dominant thing that we have to worry about. And like I say, I submit to you that I believe it's a distraction, because Rome really still lives. It may not have the power it once had, but it's going to. And of course, when you look at some of the things that Rome did, they changed a lot of things, and they seem to be a pretty dominant power. I can look at Islam and say, well, no, that's not a religion that follows Jesus Christ. That's easy for me to to make that decision, or to come to a logical conclusion. But the Catholic Church has spawned many daughters, and as a result, there are many churches out there that look, they look pretty good in a sense, but they are really still following the dictates of Rome, even though they are of what we would call Protestant by nature. They still are teaching and practicing some of the things that they got from, Rome itself. One of the things I want to share with you, I was looking up the Council of Nicaea. It says that the Council of Nicaea had made some decisions, and of course, one of them was the fact that Christ was not born. He was begotten of the Father. He came from the Father, and therefore he existed from the beginning like the Father. That's what they're trying to say, and that's where they come up with this, the Trinity and everything else that we know is absolutely incorrect. But But the other thing that they decided at the Council of Nicaea was, and I've shortened the quote a little bit, it just said, we also send you good news, and that is that all who have been following the Jewish practice will henceforth observe customs of the Romans with regard to celebrating the Paschal event, which would be the Easter. I think I had read someplace else when years ago they had written something along the lines of that they were no longer going to follow the way of the 14ers, the quarter-decimans, and those would be the people that kept the 14th day, the first month, 14th day at even. And they said, no, we're going to celebrate the Sunday that follows that, and that would be Easter. That'll be the celebration that will go by. So this was, two big changes that they made at that particular time, which of course were wrong and are still wrong. So we go back to Daniel 7:8, and it talks about this horn coming up. He defeats these kingdoms, the Heruli, right? The Vandals, Heruli, Vandals, Ostrogoths. And it empowers them even more so. And in 9 it says, I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit. So it's talking about the point that's going to come along where, Christ is really going to destroy all the kingdoms, and the only kingdom that's really going to be left is his. In 13 it talks about, I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And there was given to him, so this is the Son coming to the Father, the Ancient of Days. And it says in 14, and there was given to him dominion and glory and kingdom, that all people, nations, languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, in his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. So he goes on, he talks about the interpretation of the beast vision. But I'm going to leave us there at this particular time, because I know that there's a lot of information here. There's a lot to digest, and I think it would be important for you to sit down and study this and help yourself in digesting this so that you understand the big prophecies that Daniel has talked about, the dreams that he has interpreted, and the information that he has given to each and every one of us. Until next time, this is Pastor Bud Randall saying goodbye, friends.